I really never thought I'd do an unboxing video, but here I am doing one. Excitement. Okay, a freebie with a little bit of fertilizer. Right. Here it is. Well, this isn't going to break in time. Perfect. Perfect. I chose this pot for the right size and shape, and the fact that it's brown and unglazed, well, that suits pretty much any tree. Rectangular pots are usually considered for masculine looking trees, but I don't think this pot is over the top when you look at it at eye level. The sloping sides follow the same line as the trunk of the tree, that you'll see in a couple of seconds. This is an Olea Oleaster, which is a subspecies of the olive. It's known as a wild olive, and in some ways it's better for bonsai than your normal olive because of its lovely small leaf size. So in theory I can make it look more like a real miniature tree to mimic nature. That's the aim here anyway. Let's see how I get on.
Dreams that you dream of, dreams really do come true.
I'm starting by giving it a light trim of some of the longer, more leggy branches, and especially off the top. I won't do any major branch pruning at the same time as repotting and pruning the roots, because over the next few months I need enough leaf surface area to collect the light and give the tree energy to regrow the roots. But at the same time, in the couple of weeks following root pruning, a lot of the branches will lose some of the older leaves, and so that's a good reason to trim some of the ends off now, so that I'm not left just with long leggy bits on the end of the branches. Also, once it's in the new pot, you want to keep it still for a few weeks while the new roots establish themselves. So I'm trying to get the tree into a roughly good shape now, before repotting it. I'm also using this as an opportunity to get rid of any buds that are emerging at the base of existing branches, because you don't want two branches to come out from the trunk at the same place. That is, unless you're developing a broom-style bonsai, but this is an informal upright bonsai, and so I want to make sure that the primary branches are all clearly visible and distinct, and that the trunk is also clearly visible from the front view. There are a couple of places on the trunk where two branches are coming out of the same node, so I'll need to tidy those up later in summer or next spring when it's budding vigorously again. The crown is looking a bit messy and complicated, but I think it looks okay. I'll leave it as it is for now, and I'll sort that out in the future. Now I'm I'm going to take off all the wiring that has been on the tree since December, which is arguably a bit too long, but most of the wires are guy wires, so it'll be fine. I did wind the wire around two of the branches that needed to be moved to the right, which couldn't be done with guy wire. They may have left a bit of mark on the branch, but I don't think it'll be too bad. We'll see how it looks. Having a bit of difficulty removing that wire, so I'm clipping it off bit by bit. That's actually another good reason to use guy wiring for trees with fragile bark, because removing it is so much easier without damaging the bark. That, and also try not to get rid of any leaves in the process. An obvious disadvantage of guy wiring is that the wires are a lot more visible than normal branch wiring. And perhaps a not so obvious disadvantage is that the wires can actually get in the way of the watering nozzle when you're watering the soil. But to balance that out, on the good side, you can use the thinnest gauge wires that you have and it'll pull down any branches no problem. Here I used 1mm aluminium wire, but in fact I've just got myself some 0.4mm copper wire for a different tree, and that is much less visible. You know, I'm going to skip past all this unwiring and fast forward to taking it out of the pot. Okay, here's the proof that it does rain in Spain. This repotting sickle looks quite a bit too big for the job, but actually I find it really useful. It's serrated, and when a bonsai has been in a pot for a couple of years, the roots and soil can be really crushed hard against the inside edges of the pot, so a serrated knife like this is very useful to get it out. The roots were not drastically pot bound. Actually, they look pretty good and healthy. I'm starting as usual by taking off the usable moss, and I'll just rake away the top surface of anything that's not really usable. I'm raking always radially away from the trunk, because you always want to keep the radial roots that grow away from the trunk, because in the future they'll make nice nabari. Any roots that are crossing those or going concentrically around the trunk, we need to get rid of those, so it's fine just to rake through them. And now I'm starting from the bottom of the root ball with a root hook, but still from the centre outwards. Speeding it up a bit here because teasing out the roots can take quite a long time. And spraying it to keep the roots and the leaves nice and moist, which is essential in this Madrid climate. And now it's time to start pruning off the longer and unwanted roots. I've had several people asking me after watching these videos, how can I possibly prune off 8/10 of the root ball and still be sure that the tree's going to survive? It depends on a few factors. One of them is the species of tree. Olive as a species is pretty resilient. Another factor is the aftercare, trying to keep the leaves humid for a few days after repotting. Because while the tree is in shock for a few days after losing its roots, it's not supplying much water from those roots up through to the leaves. That root there looks like somebody left it to become a nabari. And this one too, but they're both just sticking out of the trunk flare, so I'm going to take them off. The idea is to have the roots flowing directly down right from the trunk flare, not growing out of it. So I'm tidying up the wound. It'll probably be a scar for a few years, but that's better than an ugly adventitious root. Now you can see how the fine roots flow down diagonally from the trunk base. Looks good. Still got to get rid of some downward roots from underneath the root base, because as those vertical roots grow thicker, those are the ones that make it impossible to plant in a shallow pot. I'm now dunking it in water just to see very clearly what roots are left. You can see I've chopped off most of the thicker downward roots, but there's still one or two that need to be dealt with. This might be the most severe root pruning this tree will ever get. I'll now leave it for at least 2 years without repotting to let all the radial roots get really strong. That's another one sticking in the wrong direction that I had to clip off. That's looking pretty flat now. I think that's enough for this year. You can always find more faults in the roots, but I've got to leave some roots on there. Now onto the famous new pot for this tree, the bit that I've been looking forward to. Just measuring up now. I don't think it needs any more root pruning to fit in there. My base layer soil is a mix of quite large granule size akadama and pine bark. For the main soil, I'm mixing in akadama, pumice and pine bark in about equal quantities. So only 1/3 organic content could be a bit too dry for some trees in smaller pots, but the olive can really withstand drought, and so 2/3 of inorganic content is fine for this tree. You could quite easily use 100% akadama without any problem, but the pine bark has slightly different retention properties for the nutrients in the fertiliser. So I found the mix is best, for this climate anyway. Your mileage may differ, as they say. Now I'm wiring it in with 2mm wire, both in front of and behind the trunk, to really make sure it doesn't budge in the pot over the next couple of months or so, and let the new fine roots grow undisturbed. Now the challenge is to get the front pointing forwards and the potting angle just right. Sometimes I have to do this step 2 or 3 times before I'm really happy with the angle. Now cutting off the excess wires and tightening up the remaining wires. As I put in some more soil, a trick I sometimes do is actually to try and hold the trunk in exactly the right place and then poke the soil right under the trunk. in a minute, I'm going to check the potting angle one more time because it's going to be this way for the next 2 years. Yep, that looks good from the front and the side, so I'll tighten up the wires right there. And you can never have too much water or misting, so go for it. And now it's time to put a layer of topsoil. And in fact, in this case, I'm actually going to do 2 layers. One layer of akadama here, which I'll flatten, chopstick down, and put in nice and evenly across the surface. And for the first time this year, I'm also trying some Kiryazuna. So that's very good for the surface because it's basically white colour. It's nice small grains I've got, show-in size here. Even though this tree is bigger than show-in size, but for the top layer it's pretty good to have small grains because it seems to retain a bit more water. And this Kiryazuna doesn't break down as easily as akadama. And I really like the fact that it changes colour so much between wet and dry. So it's very easy to see when it's just starting to dry on the surface. You can probably see I really enjoy putting the topsoil and seeing the final image. I'm just deciding if I should rewire it now, but in fact I think I'm just going to leave it till mid or late summer and put the wires on again then. And my work here is done. It just remains to give it a slow spin around so you can get the 360-degree view of it. Thank you so much for watching, hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't already subscribed, please do go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that you can get notified of my upcoming videos.